Most of you know both of these people. Piers Morgan somehow has made and it also has to do with Israel, of course, somehow has made a career, especially recently, out of having people on to just school him and make him look like a sad, pathetic genocide denier. And that's how he gets the most views. So, he's a scam artist, so he just wants the most YouTube clicks. He doesn't care. He seems to care during the interview, but apparently he doesn't care enough to not book people who are going to make him look like fools. Now, I, of course, am fine with that, because if you want to keep booking people who actually stand up for Palestinian rights, who stand up against Israel and this genocide, then book away, my good friend. But it is amazing that it seems like once every 2 weeks, you have someone on Piers Morgan just making him look like a effing clown, and yet he keeps having him back. So, all right, fine then. But this is him talking to Lowkey. Lowkey, of course, does amazing work. Lowkey is a rapper, but he's also works for Mint Press. He does interviews. He does articles. He does protests. And he was my colleague for a year that I worked at Mint Press, just a year ago. For a year, I worked at Mint Press, did videos there, and I spoke to Lowkey almost every week. So here he is,
stating objective facts as a journalist that has researched this topic.
But what about the 1,200 people who they murdered and the 7,000 they wounded?
No. Hundreds of those people were killed when Israel implemented the Hannibal Directive.
That's simply not true.
It simply is true.
It isn't.
And I encourage...
I brought this up last time. I played a clip of Piers Morgan several weeks ago where I think it might have been Lowkey. I think it was George Galloway brought up the Hannibal Directive, and Piers Morgan goes, the what? And he'd never heard of it. This is like a month ago. So 11 months of everybody talking about the Hannibal Directive, and he never heard of it. Now he's heard of it because he's a little bit more ready for this interview with Lowkey, yet he refuses to acknowledge that it did anything, when in fact, a large percentage, actually could be as much as 2/3, but a lot of them were killed by the IDF. And right here, Piers Morgan is trying to deny that.
You, in the spirit of journalistic inquiry and curiosity, to really look that up.
It's already been thoroughly investigated.
It absolutely has not.
But it has, Lowkey.
It's been investigated by Al Jazeera. It's been investigated by trustable news sources that have found this to be the case.
No, it's not true that hundreds of people in those named casualty numbers on the Israeli side
were killed by Israel.
No,
it's a fact.
And Lowkey's, of course, right. It is absolutely a fact that hundreds of people were killed by the Hannibal Directive, which says that if Israelis are taking hostages, kill everyone. Kill the hostages, kill the hostage takers, kill everyone around. And we know that Apache helicopters just mowed people down. Now, it doesn't mean Hamas didn't kill any of these people, but it does mean a lot of them were killed by the IDF.
It's a documented fact. And you know what else? If you were to study those cars which were put forth as evidence that Hamas had killed those people fleeing the Nova Festival, the order came directly from the Israeli Air Force. This is a mass Hannibal. This is a dead zone. No cars will pass.
Did you watch the documentary? Did you watch the documentary?
I wish, and now Piers is just pivoting, I wish Lowkey, I mean, he's also getting talked over, but I wish Lowkey had also had the time to say that those cars, because the Israeli government does not want you to see them, those cars have been shredded and buried in an undisclosed location. Does that sound like people who are innocent and want you to see that it was all done by Hamas? Not so much.
Last week on BBC Two.
No.
About the music festival, right? You literally see Hamas fighters with their GoPros going from car to car, murdering people.
That happened. Yeah, that happened.
Why are you trying to diminish the scale of what was going on?
So this is a lot of their debate. Is Lowkey will bring up a great point. Piers Morgan will just pivot to what about Hamas? But of course, the reason it's more important to talk about what Israel did than what Hamas did in today's time right now is because it's not covered at all. Piers says, why aren't you talking about Hamas killing people? And the truth is that aspect is covered endlessly. How many times have you turned on a mainstream media and heard about Hamas killing people on October 7th? It's the other side of things that is completely covered up, except by, like Lowkey said, an Al Jazeera report, a few reports here and there. But one of these sides is well known that Hamas killed people on October 7th. One of these sides is completely covered up, despite the fact that we now have the evidence that is true. So that's the difference. It's the job of a journalist to out the stuff people don't already know.
I've just said that happened. That doesn't equate to diminishing what you've just stated.
It doesn't say hundreds of
You're diminishing Apache helicopters bombing cars that contained civilians. You're diminishing all of the Israeli captives that have been killed by Israeli airstrikes. Israeli captives have come out of Gaza and said very clearly that actually they were scared of being killed by Israeli airstrikes.
Why are there hostages at all?
See, again, doesn't address anything that Lowkey just said and switches to what about Hamas? But what about Hamas? But a lot of this 40 minutes or so is this back and forth where Lowkey will lecture him on the reality, which absolutely is the reality of this genocide. And Piers Morgan will just sit there silently like a dog who's being, shown a magic trick. It's just like, he'll just sit there. And then when Lowkey pauses for a second, he'll go, but what about Hamas did this? What about Hamas did that? And he'll act like nothing was said during the 5 minutes that Lowkey just lectured him on the things he never talks about.
And F-35, you're talking about asymmetrical warfare. But the thing that Israel doesn't remember, and which Israel has to know and must know, that winning a war is not about killing on an industrial scale the weakest among the population you are targeting, which Israel excels at, which is the essence of Zionism. Winning a war is about the largest amount of people being convinced of your viewpoint. If we use that metric to understand this war, Israel has lost in Gaza and it will lose in Lebanon because Israel has more enemies around the world than ever before. More people are critical of Zionism than ever before. More people understand it to be essentially an anti-life ideology, which is causing mass human suffering.
I love that point. That's a beautiful point. That define winning a war. Winning a war can be the number of people you kill. It can be the amount of ground you take, depending on the type of war. It can be various aspects. If there's a king, it could be as the king dragged in the street and guillotined. Like, there are various ways to consider winning a war. But one of them, which Lowkey's speaking to, is the belief around the world of who is right in this, battle, if you could call a genocide a battle. Who is in the right? And the world is definitely not with Israel. I mean, the UN just voted that Israel needs to get out of all the occupied territories, which would also mean leaving Gaza. That was the UN General Assembly. All but 14 nations voted that needed to happen out of like 192 or whatever in the UN. 80% of the world's population, billions and billions of people, are in countries that are not in any way supporting Israel or making statements of support to Israel, etc., during this genocide. And even in the other 20% of the world's population, like me in the United States, many of us are not supporting Israel. Israel is losing this war in that regard, and that regard may be one of the biggest battles, is the battle of public opinion globally. The world is against the Zionist apartheid system, and Israel is largely responsible for this because it was Israel's choice to commit genocide. It was Israel's choice to do something that is live streamed to us all day, and it is utterly horrific. And no one who's remotely moral can support it. Coming from the Jewish community, I realize there are many who do this, but unless they close their eyes and go, no, in their ear holes, you cannot support this. Now, there are people doing that. I certainly understand that. But I love this point by Lowkey that winning a war can be different things.
But Lowkey, at the same time, Hamas, Hezbollah are wedded, and make no secret of being wedded, to the destruction of Israel. The destruction. That is a nihilistic form of genocide. The very genocide that its supporters, like you, would say is being waged against their people. They are explicit. We want the destruction of Israel.
Okay. Lowkey doesn't realize that in his phrasing of this, it's a trick. They are explicit. Hamas is, Hezbollah is, that they want the destruction of Israel. But most of them, I'm not saying none of them, but for those who do say this, it's ignorant. But what they don't generally say is we want the destruction of all Jews. They want the destruction of Israel, the nation state. When he says, when Piers says they want the destruction of Israel, he says that is by definition genocide. No, it's actually not. Ending a nation state, ending an apartheid state is not genocide. Genocide is the destruction of a people. It is killing a people. If Israel, the nation state, the apartheid nation state, were to disband tomorrow, now I'm not talking murder, I'm talking disbanding the nation state, that's not genocide. But he is conflating, as Israel has tried to do for over decades with propaganda, he is conflating the state of Israel with the people who live in Israel. And sometimes Israel wants you to conflate the state of Israel with all Jews around the world, which we are not one thing. Many of us are anti-Zionist. Anyway, Lowkey doesn't realize, I mean, when you're trying to parse everything that's being said in one of these debates, it's not easy, but he didn't realize this linguistic trick that Piers says, oh, well, that's genocide. They say they want the end of Israel. That's genocide. No, they didn't say we want to kill everyone in Israel. They said we want the end of the apartheid nation state of Israel. And that's what they say.
Well, and they have tried to enact this on October the 7th, and Hezbollah's response the next day, within hours, was to unleash rockets on Israel as well, and to carry on doing it for a year. At some point, Israel obviously was going to respond with massive force to the biggest attack on its people.
I always love this debate, and Piers Morgan has used this before. Other people have used, this argument, this angle of argument is, what did they expect? So apparently, if you expect a genocide, then genocide's fine. Oh, if we do this, they're going to commit genocide. Well, then the genocide's fine. What did they expect is not a debate to allow genocide. It doesn't matter what they expected. It doesn't matter who expected what. I don't think they expected 200,000 murdered by Israel. But even if they did, even if they said, oh, they're totally going to genocide us, still doesn't change the fact it's a fucking genocide. This angle of argument, what did they expect, is just the saddest, most pathetic, admission of losing a debate.
Obviously, they were going to do that. Hamas knew they would do that. Iran, who were funding it, knew they were going to do that. Hezbollah knew they would do that. Hezbollah knew if they kept rattling the Israel cage with their rockets, that they would get a response of the kind we're seeing.
And this angle of argument is also dumb because, well, what did Israel expect? You've put millions of people in open-air prisons. You harass them endlessly. You murder some endlessly. You murder journalists endlessly. You cut off medication. You make it so that average illnesses that most of us can survive are death sentence in places like Gaza. You decrease the amount of food. You kill people's children. You kill people's parents. You kill people's families. What did they expect? The what did they expect argument, to me, is just a dumb argument because you can take it from either angle. What did Israel expect? They didn't expect any pushback ever to the Nakba, putting people in this prison and not letting them out. It's just, what did they expect?
Now, what they underestimated is that Israel would be quite as successful as they're being right now.
Successful. He's using the term successful for a genocide. He's using the term successful for a mass terror attack across Lebanon. Oh, wow. They've been so successful at genocide. They're honestly, I'd have to put them top 3 genociders. I would. I'd say maybe even top 2. America did a pretty good job against the Native Americans. The white people did, and I'd say the Nazis did a pretty. Their job was, I don't know. It's a tough fight for 2 and 3 there. It really is. What are you talking about successful? He's so repulsive.
With Hezbollah and taking out all its command leadership, and you can feel that the momentum has switched now, where Israeli people, in particular, and all the polling, are now beginning to go back to supporting Netanyahu because they believe
they're supporting Netanyahu a little more now because they want genocide. Israelis in polling want to, quote unquote, finish the job in Gaza. What is finish the job? Ethnic cleansing. So the protests you've seen against Netanyahu are not that he killed too many people or that he's bombing children, or the protests against Netanyahu or that he doesn't seem interested in getting the hostages out, which is so sad. It's so sick.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe in the provisions of the Genocide Convention?
I do not believe what Israel's doing is waging genocide.
That's not what I'm asking.
You know why?
It's not what I'm asking you. It's not what I'm asking you. Why am I?
Although I kind of want to hear that answer. Why is it not genocide? If you look at the definition of genocide, it is every characteristic of the definition of genocide that Israel's committing.
Asking you is Article 1 of the Convention on the Prevention and the Punishment of Genocide says that all parties that are part of this are under obligation to prevent the occurrence of genocide and punish those responsible for its commission. There is a sound argument.
How many people live in Gaza? How many people live in Gaza?
2 million people live in Gaza.
How many have been killed?
Well, the Lancet Medical Journal has put forth the assertion that 200,000 people's lives have been ended by Israel's operation.
Well, it's completely untrue.
So now he doesn't believe the Lancet Medical Journal. It's not completely untrue, but it is 200,000, probably quite many more. Many have put out a justifiable belief that it's way over 200,000, but Piers Morgan is not counting those who died from famine and died from disease, which was part of Israel's plans. That's why they blew up all the hospitals, was because they want disease and famine to kill far more than they're killing with bombs. That's their aim.
But that's the Lancet Medical Journal. So the Lancet Medical Journal is a more trustworthy source than you. The Palestinians are saying 42.
I like that line. The Lancet Medical Journal is a lot more trustworthy than you goddamn goon.
As of today.
The Palestinian Hamas run.
No, but that's
Palestinian
not how
Health
genocide
Authority
works.
for 40
But that's not how genocide works,
No,
Piers.
no.
But you know that's not how genocide
No,
works.
I'm about to tell you.
But you know that's not how genocide works.
So you don't believe the Palestinian Health Authority numbers?
No, I believe them. But what I'm saying
You think
to
5 times as many people have been killed?
I've literally just quoted to you what the Lancet Medical Association has said, and I've also quoted to you what they have
You know
said
why it
there.
matters,
But
right?
that's also not how
You know why it
genocide
matters?
works.
I
That's not how genocide works.
share a lot of your misgivings about the scale and proportionate response.
Misgivings. Could you imagine anyone during the Holocaust how would you look at them if you went, I share your misgivings about the gas chambers. I have some misgivings myself. I mean, that is repulsive, calling it misgivings.
Response of what's been going on in Gaza. And I've said that repeatedly. But I don't think it constitutes a genocide because Israel has the power, should it want to kill all 2 million.
But this
Well,
is not the argument.
Let me finish.
Again, the dumbest arguments I've heard on this is people go, Israel had the power to murder everyone if they wanted to. It doesn't matter. And here's what Lowkey keeps saying, that's not how genocide works. If you look at the definition of genocide, it is not, did you kill them all? That is not it, okay? Is there an effort to kill a large segment of a people simply for who they are? And that is exactly what this is. And you will see this with every genocide that's been committed over the years. You see it with the Native Americans. You've seen it with the Holocaust. It does not mean many Jews survived the Holocaust. Many Jews in Germany survived the Holocaust. It doesn't mean it wasn't a genocide. It is such a dumb argument that it's not a genocide if they haven't killed everyone. What? And it's not just that it's wrong. It's that it is to fall back on that as your defense means you have lost every other argument there is. If you find yourself pushed so far back trying to defend Israel that you say is not a genocide if you haven't killed every last one, then you have lost every ounce of this argument.
What constitutes
Let me
genocide,
finish.
though?
They have the power to eradicate every single Palestinian.
Was genocide committed on the Aboriginal people of Australia?
I'm not going to go over the whole
They
history of
still
genocide.
exist. So therefore, your argument is that they were not subject to genocide following the arrival of Captain Cook.
Exactly. Of course, Pierce ignores that. The argument that, if any people still exist and it wasn't a genocide, then you do not understand the definition. And that would be insane because in every genocide that's ever been committed across this world, generally someone still exists.
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
Absolutely
Because I have
sure.
a question.
What's your question?
Rupert Murdoch,
Yeah.
News Corp International,
Yeah.
which employed you for several years.
Yes.
Which actually
It employs me now.
It employs you now.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting to the issue.
Yes. What do you
News
think
Corp-
the issue is?
News-
I
I'll
saw what you
explain to
tweeted. What does it have to do with me?
Not my tweets. I have a question for you.
Hmm.
News Corp International had a charitable arm which funded the Jerusalem Foundation, which builds illegal
What's this got
settlements.
to do with me?
Illegal settlements in
What's it got to do with
Jerusalem.
me?
Do you condemn Rupert Murdoch?
What's it got to do with me?
Do you condemn Rupert Murdoch?
I'm not talking about Rupert
do you,
Murdoch.
do you condemn Rupert Murdoch?
I'm not talking
This
about
here,
Rupert Murdoch.
this has never been shown on British media. This is a letter from Netanyahu's political office. And Bridget may well recognize the handwriting of Benjamin Netanyahu
Okay.
here. It is a list of individuals that Netanyahu considered to be funders of his political campaign. There is a name on this list. The name is Rupert Murdoch.
Look at Piers Morgan just having to sit and take this.
Your employer.
You know what, Lowkey?
It seems he funded Benjamin Netanyahu.
You know
That's
what?
an issue.
You know what, Lowkey? It's not an issue for me.
It's an issue,
Nobody
and actually, it's
tells-
in the
no.
interest of objectivity
Understand one thing.
that you state it.
Rupert Murdoch can speak for himself. You've got a problem with him, take it up with him.
I do.
I
yeah.
can tell you categorically, he has never had a single conversation with me about anything I've put on Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Sam Kiley
Ever.
resigned
Ever.
from the Times newspaper
Ever.
because of Murdoch's investment
Fine.
and bias.
If you have a
towards Israel.
problem-
Great point by Lowkey, and it just continues to go back and forth like that. But that Piers Morgan's boss technically is Rupert Murdoch for years and years, and continues to be Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch both funds illegal settlements in Israel. He is a strong Zionist, and as he's saying, is on a list of Netanyahu's top funders, or at one time was. And Piers Morgan goes on to say, well, he never called me up and told me not to say anything. Well, that could be true. I don't know that's true. Piers Morgan strikes me as someone who would lie, but he knows what Rupert Murdoch is, and he knows what would get him fired. And I'm sure that it's probably a red line for him to come out full-throatedly, not his limp-wristed misgivings about not that, but actually say this is genocide. It needs to stop. They're murdering children on a daily basis. If he were to do that, probably be the end of his job, maybe the end of his career. So you don't need to get a phone call from Murdoch to know that. And so Lowkey's got a great point here about who Piers Morgan's boss is and who he's funded by. And Piers Morgan has no answer for it. That's why I'm not going to continue playing it. It's just him trying desperately to change the subject while Lowkey tries not to allow him to change the subject. Well, good job, Lowkey. Still wanted to point out some important points there.